The house my father built, and the man who tried to steal it. The rain was coming in sideways like God himself had a grudge against our street. I was standing barefoot in the front yard of the only house I had ever called home, soaking wet, with nothing but the clothes on my back and my phone in my pocket. The emergency broadcast siren had gone off 4 times in the last hour and a half. Hurricane Delilah was maybe 2 hours out, and the meteorologists on every single channel had stopped being nice about it. They were using words like catastrophic and life-threatening, and the mandatory evacuation order for our part of the county had gone from voluntary to get out now somewhere around dinner time. Through the living room window I could see my stepfather, Gary, pressing thick plastic sheeting over the glass with a staple gun. My mother, Sandra, was right beside him, handing him strips like a nurse handing tools to a surgeon. Neither one of them looked toward the yard. Neither one of them looked toward me. The deadbolt had turned 12 minutes ago. Then the chain. I know because I counted every second. Then the headlights appeared at the end of Cedar Hollow Road. Car was long, black, and moving slow, the way expensive things move when they have nowhere urgent to be. A limousine. On our street. During a hurricane. Stopped at the end of our driveway. The engine stayed running. The rear passenger door opened from the inside, and a woman stepped out into the pouring rain like the storm was somebody else's problem. She was 71 years old, and I had not seen her face in 14 years. She looked at me standing barefoot in the grass. Then she looked at the house, at the plastic-covered windows, at the sealed front door, at the driveway where no one had come out to check on me. Her face was completely still. She said one word. Demolish. Hey, welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. If you are brand new here, this is the place where we get into real family stuff, boundaries, betrayal, the quiet moments that change the direction of your whole life. Before we go any further, hit that like button right now if you are already hooked, and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from and what time it is where you are. Seriously, I read every single one. Now let's get into it because this story does not start in a hurricane. It starts on a Sunday morning when the sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at. I was 12 years old the first Sunday Gary Mercer walked through our front door. The sky that morning looked like something out of a painting, clear, still, and almost offensively beautiful. My dad, Thomas Callahan, had been gone for 15 months. The house on Cedar Hollow Road still held pieces of him the way old wood holds old smells. Sawdust. Motor oil. The cedar scent of the workshop soap he bought in bulk because the hardware store brand was $4 cheaper than the pharmacy. He thought that was hilarious. He was genuinely proud of saving those $4. My mom, Sandra, was scrambling eggs at the stove and humming something I didn't recognize. She had color in her face for the first time in over a year. Gary pulled into the driveway in a red pickup truck with a magnetic sign on the door that said Mercer Auto and Repair. He walked through the front door carrying a toolbox without knocking. My mother smiled at him. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her, the kind that reaches all the way to the eyes, since the funeral. And I remember sitting at that kitchen table with my orange juice, coaching myself. This is a good thing. She is happy. Just be happy. Gary said he was going to fix the fence. My dad had been meaning to reset the posts on the east side before the ground froze and never got to it. Gary spent the whole afternoon measuring, digging, pouring concrete, and bolting new rails. He was careful and exact. He worked the way men work when they are trying to impress somebody. My mom brought him sweet tea in a mason jar. I sat on the porch and watched because nobody told me to come inside and nobody asked me what I thought. By 4 o'clock, the fence was done. Gary stepped back and looked at it like he had personally won a fight with the universe. Then he cracked open a can of white exterior paint and started rolling it on. White. The fence had been a deep, specific shade of blue, the color of the Atlantic right before a storm rolls in. My dad had picked it himself when I was 4, the year he bought this house. He called it Harbor Blue. He said every house on a street like ours needed one thing that stood out, one thing that said somebody with a real vision lives here. I didn't say a word as Gary painted over it. I went inside. washed my glass, put it in the drying rack. That was the first Sunday. There would be a whole lot more. Here is the thing people never quite understood when I tried to explain Gary to them later. He did not yell. He did not throw things. He did not hit anybody. He was not that kind of man. He was worse than that kind of man because what Gary did was quieter and it worked better. He rearranged the house one room at a time. Photos of my dad came off the walls within the first month. Not all at once, Gary was too smart for that. One frame disappeared on a Tuesday. Another on a Thursday. By December, the only picture of my father still in the house was a wallet-sized photo I kept in the back of my sock drawer, pressed between two pieces of cardboard cut from a cereal box. He changed the home phone number and told my mom it was because of telemarketers. My grandmother, Eleanor, called the old number for almost a month before she realized it had been cut off. By then, Gary had already told me, plain and easy like he was reading a grocery list, "Your grandma's got her own life now, Jamie. She's moving on. Don't take it personal." I was 13. I believed him. He sorted the mail before anyone else touched it. Every envelope that came through the slot went through Gary's hands first. He'd open them at the kitchen counter with a steak knife, no rush, very calm, then leave a small stack of the ones he decided were okay by the telephone. I did not understand then what he was looking for. I would not understand it for 16 years. He decided which school I would go to, which friends were okay, what time I had to be home. He made every single one of these decisions with a calm, reasonable voice, and my mother stood beside every one of them like a woman holding an umbrella for someone else in the rain. "Gary just wants what's best for this family, Jamie." She said it so many times it stopped being a sentence and turned into something more like background noise, like the hum of the refrigerator. You stop hearing it. I learned not to argue. Arguing burned up energy I could not afford and changed exactly nothing. So instead I saved. I kept my dad's pocket watch in the bottom drawer of my dresser, wrapped in a cotton handkerchief my grandmother had stitched with my initials the year I was born. The watch had a cracked crystal and a second hand that ticked louder than it probably should have. But I wound it every single morning. I never forgot. That watch was the only thing in that house that still belonged to me without Gary's okay. I was 17 when I stopped bringing friends home. Not because Gary ever said anything out loud. It was the way he talked to them, super friendly, almost too friendly, and then the way he talked to me right after they left. "That girl's got a real smart mouth, don't she?" Or, "Her parents don't seem to keep much of an eye on her." Or sometimes just a look. A very specific look that said, "We'll talk about this later," except later never came and you spent the next 3 days waiting for a conversation that never happened. That kind of thing messes with your head in ways that are hard to explain to people who have never lived it. I was 19 when I started keeping a journal in a storage unit I rented with cash from a part-time grocery store job Gary didn't know about. $3 a month to keep a spiral notebook. I wrote down dates, times, exactly what was said, what was hinted at. Not because I thought I was building some kind of legal case. I did it because writing things down was the only way I could convince myself they were real. Gary had this way about him, calm, steady, always reasonable, that made your own memory feel shaky. Like maybe you heard it wrong. Like maybe you were being too sensitive. The journal is gone now. I threw it away myself years later because I didn't need it anymore. I had found something better. I had found the paperwork. Hey, quick break right here. If any part of this story is landing for you, if you have ever been in a house where the rules changed depending on who was in the room, drop a comment right now. Tell me your city and what time it is where you are. You would not believe how many people from all over are watching this together right now. You are not alone in this. Okay. Keep going. My dad, Thomas Callahan, was the kind of man who could look at a broken thing and see exactly what it was supposed to be. He was a licensed electrician by trade and a building contractor by sheer stubbornness. In 1996, the year I was born, he bought this house on Cedar Hollow Road with money he had been putting away since he was 19 years old. My grandmother told me once that she walked through the front door with him the day he got the keys, and the ceiling was peeling, the wiring was a straight-up fire hazard, and one of the kitchen walls had a hole in it the size of a dinner plate. My dad pointed at all of it and said, "I can fix every single thing in here." And he did. He built the back bedroom himself, 3 weekends and 1 Monday he called in sick for. When it was done, he carried me down the hallway on his shoulders, opened the door and said, "This one is yours, Jamie girl." The room had a window that faced the garden, and in the mornings the sun came in at an angle that turned the walls the color of honey. He had sanded the floor by hand because the rental machine left marks he didn't like. He was the kind of guy who cared about the details that nobody else would ever notice. After Gary moved in, that room became storage. My stuff moved across the hall to the smaller room. Gary filled the back bedroom with auto parts, a portable air compressor, and 3 sets of rims he kept saying he was going to sell and never did. The window that faced the garden stayed closed. The sun still came in, but it lit up cardboard boxes and oil-stained rags instead of my bed. My grandmother used to come every Sunday. She'd bring an almond pound cake from a little bakery on Route 17 and sit out on the porch and tell me stories about her business. Eleanor Callahan had started with a small flower shop back in 1981, then turned it into a property management company, then a real estate investment firm. She was the sharpest person I had ever known. She taught me how to read a contract, how to spot when a number had been moved, how to ask the right question instead of just the polite one. "People lie with their mouths," she told me once. "But they almost never lie with paperwork." Then one Sunday she didn't come. My mom said she was busy. The next Sunday, busy again. And the Sunday after that, I stopped asking. I didn't see my grandmother again for 14 years. Not until the night the hurricane came and a black limousine turned onto our street. I found the bank statements on a Wednesday afternoon in April, 4 months before the hurricane. I'd come home early from the hospital where I worked as a medical records coordinator. The whole computer system had gone down and my supervisor sent everyone home at 2. Gary was at his buddy's body shop across town. My mom was out running errands. The house had that specific kind of quiet it only ever got when Gary was not in it. Kind of quiet that had space in it. Room to breathe. I went into the back bedroom looking for my original health information management certificate. County was updating their records database and needed documentation from every coordinator on staff. My folder was in a plastic bin under a stack of Gary's boxes. I moved them one at a time. The third box was a shoebox with no lid. It was full of envelopes from a life insurance company. My dad's name was on every single one. I sat down on the floor right there between the rims and the air compressor and I read them. Policy had been set up when I was 2 years old, a term life plan that turned into a permanent fund after my dad died. Person named to receive the money was me, Jamie Lynn Callahan, at age 25. I was 28. I had never been contacted. I had never signed a single thing. The statements laid out the rest. Withdrawals had been made starting when I was 23, a full 2 years before I was even supposed to touch that money. Total taken out was $91,000. Person who had signed to authorize these withdrawals was Gary Mercer, using a legal document called a power of attorney, basically a form that lets one person make financial decisions for another, signed by Sandra Callahan Mercer. My mother had signed over my father's life insurance money to my stepfather. I read it twice. Then a third time. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from cold. The air conditioning in that house barely worked and it was pushing 80 degrees outside. The shaking was about the signatures. It was about my mother's handwriting on a legal form that had handed Gary permission to take what my dad left for me. And the fact that for years, neither of them had ever said a single word about it. I folded those statements and put them in my jacket pocket. I put the shoebox back under the other boxes. I replaced the bins. Closed the door. Went to the kitchen, made a sandwich, and ate it standing up at the counter. I did not say anything to anyone that night. I waited. Hurricane Delilah had been a Category 2 when she crawled across the outer islands. By the time she turned northwest toward the coast, she was a 4. The Weather Service put out a mandatory evacuation for the barrier communities and a voluntary one for our part of the county, which really meant people with money and somewhere to go had already left, and everybody else was taping up windows and hoping. Gary did not want to leave. He said this house had survived every storm since it was built, which was true because my dad had built it past code on purpose. Gary said evacuating was for people who panicked, and he was not a man who panicked. What he didn't say, but what I understood by then, was that Gary didn't want to leave because this house was the only thing that made him feel like he was in charge of something real. His auto shop had closed 5 years back. His truck was financed. His name was not on the mortgage because there was no mortgage, just a trust Gary knew absolutely nothing about. The house was all he had, and he held on to it the way a man holds onto a steering wheel when the road is gone out from under him. We sat down for dinner at 6:15. Pork chops, canned green beans, sweet tea. TV was on behind us, the weather radar cycling through reds and purples. My mom ate fast. Gary ate slow. I set my fork down. Gary kept my voice level. I had practiced this. I found the statements from my dad's life insurance policy. $91,000. I need you to tell me where it went. He stopped chewing. 3 full seconds of silence. He set his fork down on the plate, and the tines made a sharp little sound against the ceramic. That money went to this house, he said. The roof. The AC unit. The yard work. Keeping the lights on for 16 years. Keeping food on this table. You lived here for free, Jamie. You owe more than you think. It was my father's money, I said. Left for me. Gary pushed his chair back from the table. My mom stood up at the exact same second, like she had been waiting for a signal. Gary pointed at the front door. Get out. When you remember your manners, you can come back. I looked at my mom. She looked at the floor. Her hands were at her sides, fingers slightly open, like she had already let go of something she had been holding a long time. I walked to the front door. I stepped outside. The deadbolt turned. Then the chain. Then I heard my mother's footsteps walking back toward the kitchen. The rain was warm at first. Then it wasn't. I stood in the yard for 12 minutes before I started walking. I know because I counted. Counting was something I had learned to do when things got bad. At work, when a record came back wrong and a doctor on the phone was losing it, I would count seconds until I could speak without my voice breaking. 12 minutes. Then I moved. The wind was already picking up hard. The rain had gone from steady to the kind that hits you sideways and stings like gravel. I walked to the end of the driveway and looked up and down Cedar Hollow Road. Some porch lights were on. Others were dark, boarded up, emptied out. Mrs. Dorothy Reeves, who lived directly across the street, had one lamp on in her front window. I could see the shape of her standing behind the curtain. I did not have shoes. I had my phone at 12% battery. Now, I know what you are thinking. Why didn't I call Dorothy? She was right there. But here is the thing, Dorothy was in her late 60s, home alone in the middle of a hurricane. The last thing I wanted to do was pull her outside or make her feel responsible for me. I didn't know then that she had already made a phone call that would change everything. I had been slowly, quietly building toward moving out. A savings account Gary didn't know about, a 1-bedroom apartment I'd toured twice, about 4 months from actually being free. Gary had just moved that deadline up by locking the door. Then the headlights turned onto Cedar Hollow Road. The limousine stopped at the end of our driveway. The engine stayed on. The rear door opened, and a woman stepped into the rain like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience she had already planned for. Silver hair pinned up. A long raincoat buttoned all the way to the collar. Flat, practical shoes made for exactly this kind of ground. She looked at me standing barefoot in the soaking wet grass. Then she looked at the house. Then she said, "Demolish." The driver came around with an umbrella and held it over me, not over her. She waved me toward the car. I got in. She got in right behind me. The door closed. Inside it was warm. Leather seats. That clean, expensive hotel smell. My grandmother reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a handkerchief without a single word. She handed it to me. I pressed it to my face. It smelled like almond cake. In her other coat pocket, I could see the corner of a yellow envelope. I didn't ask about it. I have been waiting 14 years, she said quietly, to be allowed near you. Are you watching this right now and your jaw is on the floor? Same. Drop a comment, tell me your city and the time on your clock. And if you know someone who has been pushed out of their own family's story, share this video with them right now. It might be exactly what they need to hear today. The hotel was a 15-minute drive from Cedar Hollow Road, but it felt like crossing into a completely different world. Eleanor had booked a suite on the 8th floor 2 days before the storm made landfall, which I found out later was the exact day the National Hurricane Center bumped Delilah up to a Category 3. Eleanor did not guess at weather. She read the same data everybody else read. She just believed it sooner than everyone else. The room had 2 beds, a sitting area, and a floor-to-ceiling view of the coastline that had turned into a wall of black water and sideways rain. The building itself was a solid 1980s concrete structure built by a developer my grandmother had gone up against and eventually outlasted. She mentioned this while I was standing in the bathroom doorway toweling off my hair, like she was making regular small talk. Beaumont built this hotel in 1982. Concrete frame, hurricane straps on every joist. The man understood structures. He just didn't understand people. She paused. People were always where he lost. There were dry clothes laid out on the bed. My size. Dark jeans, a soft gray hoodie, thick socks, and clean sneakers from a brand I recognized but had never been able to afford. She had packed them before she came. She had planned all of this. I sat on the edge of the bed in those dry clothes and held a mug of chamomile tea she had made from the room's kettle. Outside, Hurricane Delilah was pressing against the windows like something alive and furious, trying to get in. How did you know I was outside? I asked. Dorothy called me, she said. Dorothy Reeves from across the street. She was one of your father's closest friends on that block. She has been a friend of mine for far longer than that. You kept in touch with her over the years. I kept in touch with everyone on Cedar Hollow Road who would still talk to me. She paused. Gary changed your phone number 3 times. He sent back every letter my attorney mailed. He told you I didn't want to see you. Dorothy told me you believed him. I set the tea down. I did believe him. I know. For 14 years. I know that too. She folded her hands in her lap. The storm outside was getting louder. The lights flickered once and held. There is something you need to know, she said, about that house. My dad had bought the house on Cedar Hollow Road in 1996 with money he had borrowed, not been given borrowed, from my grandmother. Eleanor did not hand out gifts. She set terms, she kept records, and she filed everything with an attorney in a town 40 minutes away because she didn't trust local people not to talk. The house had been put into a trust, the Callahan Family Trust, set up by Eleanor Callahan in 1995, 1 year before my dad used that loan to buy the property. Trust held the actual title to the home. My father was the one who benefited from it during his lifetime. If he died, that benefit passed to me. My mother had been given what is called a life estate, meaning she had the legal right to live in the house for the rest of her life. But she could not sell it. She could not sign it over to someone else. She could not borrow money against it. Those were the terms she agreed to. Did she know? I asked. She signed the agreement before she and your father got married. Whether she read every line of it, I cannot answer that for her. And Gary? Gary has never seen the document. Gary believes Sandra owns the house outright because Sandra told him she does. Gary has never been the kind of man who double-checks paperwork he has no reason to question. I sat with that for a full minute. Lightning split the sky outside. The whole room went white and shadowless for half a second. When you said demolish, I said slowly, what exactly did you mean? My grandmother leaned forward in her chair. I meant I will take back what has always belonged to this family. The house is trust property. Gary has no legal claim to it, none. Your mother's right to live there is conditional. Can be taken away if she causes real, documented harm to the person named to inherit the property. She paused. She locked you outside during a Category 4 hurricane, Jamie. That condition is gone. She let those words sit in the room. If they refuse to leave, I will have the structure knocked down and rebuilt from the foundation up. I have done it before. I will do it again without a second thought. She said it the way she said everything, like every word had been weighed before she chose it, and she was sure about the weight. I am not going to ask for your permission, she added. But I would very much like your help with this. I picked up the tea. It had gone cold. Yes, I said. The storm passed by 4 in the morning. I know because I was awake for every single minute of it. My grandmother slept in the other bed without moving once through the worst of it. I asked her the next morning how she had slept through a Category 4 hurricane like it was nothing. I slept through worse in 1993, she said, pouring black coffee. A bank tried to freeze the account on my third property the night before a closing. I spent that whole night at a roadside motel going over documents page by page. Bad weather passes. Signed documents do not. In the morning, the coast looked like it had been picked up and put back down all wrong. Trees laid out across roads. Pontoon boats sitting in a parking lot 3 blocks from the marina. Power lines hanging between poles like wet laundry. But the buildings were standing. And when we drove slowly down Cedar Hollow Road in the limousine, going around branches and pieces of someone's fence, our street was standing too. Missing shingles, yards full of mess, but the houses were upright. My dad's house was upright. He had built it to survive exactly this kind of storm. My grandmother's attorney was waiting at the hotel by 2 that afternoon. His name was Mr. Hartwell, early 60s, gray suit, the kind of calm that comes from spending decades reading contracts and finding the same kinds of mistakes in most of them. He opened his briefcase on the conference table and laid out 3 folders. First, he said, the trust documentation. Title deed, all the terms of the life estate. Second, the insurance policy and withdrawal records. He paused. Third, he looked at my grandmother. She nodded. The third is a home equity loan application filed with a regional lender around 20 months ago. The applicant is Gary Mercer. The property listed as collateral, meaning the thing he promised the bank he owned if he couldn't pay back the money, is the Cedar Hollow Roadhouse. The loan amount was $42,000. Cosigner line shows Sandra Callahan Mercer. I stared at the folder on the table. Gary borrowed money against a house he does not own. That is correct, Hartwell said. The application includes a sworn written statement, called an affidavit, in which Gary Mercer says in writing that he is the legal owner of the home. That statement is false. And the signature on the cosigner line does not match Sandra's real handwriting that we have on file. How can you be sure? He placed a second document beside it, a notarized signature card from the Callahan Family Trust, signed by my mother back in 2002 when she accepted the life estate terms. Her real signature had a big looping S and a backward slant on the capital C. The one on the loan application was flat and too neat. Kind of handwriting that comes from someone copying something they have seen but never actually practiced. Either my mother had signed it under pressure and changed her own handwriting on purpose, or someone had signed it for her. I sat in that chair with sunlight coming through the blinds and stripes across the table, and the only sound was the wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. It reminded me of my dad's pocket watch. Hartwell laid out the options. Option 1, go after the trust violation, serve the eviction notice, and leave the loan situation alone. Option 2, go after everything, the trust violation, the eviction, and hand the loan paperwork to the district attorney's office for a criminal review. False sworn statement. fraudulent collateral. Possible forgery. Take the weekend, he said. Think it through. I did. I went back to the apartment my grandmother had rented for me, a one-bedroom near the hospital, 3rd floor, window facing east, and I sat on the bed with the folder in my lap and the window cracked open to the sounds of the neighborhood putting itself back together. Chainsaws. Generators. The steady beeping of utility trucks backing up. The regular sound of people fixing what got broken. I read those documents 3 times over 2 days. And each time the picture shifted shape. First time through, it was about the money. Second time, it was about Gary. Third time, it was about my mother's handwriting on a power of attorney that had handed Gary the keys to my dad's insurance money, and about the signature on the loan application that did not match hers, and about what all of that meant about what had been done and what had been allowed. On Saturday night, I called my grandmother. I want the house back, I said. I want the insurance money returned. And I want Gary to know in writing with his signature on it exactly why. My voice broke for the first time since the night of the storm. I had kept it steady through the limousine and the hotel and the conference table and the phone calls. Broke now in the quiet of a rented apartment with the air conditioning humming and legal papers sitting on the nightstand like a prescription I hadn't filled yet. And Mom? My grandmother asked softly. She has been choosing for a long time, I said. I cannot make that choice for her. No, she said quietly. You cannot. Hartwell filed the papers on a Monday. I did not go for criminal charges. Taking Gary to criminal court would drag my mother into a courtroom as either a victim or someone who had gone along with all of it. Even after everything, I did not want to be the person who did that to her. But I wanted the trust violation on the record. I wanted the eviction notice served. I wanted Gary to sign a notarized written statement acknowledging every one of those insurance withdrawals and agreeing to pay it all back. Every dollar. Every cent. And I wanted it filed with the county so it could never be rewritten. Hartwell said, that is a careful decision. I said, I work in medical records. Being careful is the whole job. It wasn't funny. But it was mine. Gary did not go quietly. I had not expected him to. A man who has run a household his way for 16 years does not hand over the controls just because someone delivers a letter. He looks for a new angle. He builds a new story. He finds new people to tell it to. His attorney, a man named Fitch, operating out of a small office squeezed between a payday loan place and a cell phone repair shop in a strip mall on Route 9, filed a legal challenge within a week. The argument was called adverse possession, which is a legal concept that says if a person lives somewhere long enough, takes care of it, and pays the bills on it, they can sometimes claim ownership. Gary had lived in the house 16 years, fixed the roof, paid property taxes, painted every wall. Hartwell reviewed it and set down his reading glasses. Adverse possession cannot be used to claim a trust property. That is settled law in this state. Mr. Fitch either does not know that or is hoping the judge doesn't notice. Then why file it at all? 'Cause Gary needed to feel like he was still doing something. And because every legal filing buys time. What could be handled in 2 weeks now takes 60 days minimum. Outside of any courtroom, Gary was running a completely different play. He posted on the neighborhood group page a long, carefully written post saying his stepdaughter had left the house on her own during the storm even though he and Sandra had tried their best to keep her safe. He described how his mother-in-law, a wealthy real estate developer, was going after a working family in the wake of a natural disaster. He used phrases like predatory behavior and taking advantage of good people. 63 people reacted to that post. My phone buzzed for 2 straight days with notifications I had promised myself not to open. I opened every single one anyway. A woman in a town 80 miles away called me an ungrateful kid. A man said my grandmother should be looked into for financial abuse, which made absolutely no sense but had 52 thumbs up. Another person wrote, "These kids today have no loyalty." They were all standing up for Gary, the man who had locked me outside in a Category 4 hurricane. The man who had taken $91,000 out of a life insurance policy my dad left for me. The man who had borrowed against a house he did not own using a signature that was not my mother's. I turned my phone face down and lay in the dark and listened to the traffic on the overpass. There were two people who showed up in this story around this time, and both of them mattered a whole lot. The first was Mrs. Dorothy Reeves, the neighbor who had been watching from her window the night of the storm and who, as it turned out, had already taken action before I even thought to ask. She called me on a Thursday evening, voice steady and straight to the point. "I saw everything that night, Jamie. I saw them lock that door. I saw you standing in that yard. I saw the rain getting worse by the minute. I called Eleanor because I didn't know what else to do, and I have been waiting ever since for someone to ask me to say it officially." "Would you say all of that again in front of a notary?" I asked. "Already booked the appointment," she said. "Friday morning at Hartwell's office." I stood in my kitchen for a long time after we hung up. And for the first time in weeks, what I felt was not anger, not grief, and not that particular bone-deep tiredness that comes from carrying a truth that nobody else around you will say out loud. What I felt was something quieter than all of that. It was the feeling of not standing alone. And if you have ever gone a long stretch feeling invisible inside your own family, you know exactly what I mean when I say that one small feeling, just being seen and believed by one person, can be the thing that finally gets you moving forward. The second person was someone I had not expected at all, my co-worker Marcus Webb. Marcus worked 2 floors above me in hospital administration, and we had always been friendly without ever being really close. When word got around that I was dealing with a family property fight, he found me in the parking garage one evening with a folder in his hand. "My aunt is a real estate paralegal," he said. "She looked at what you described. She found something your lawyer is going to want to see." He set the folder on the hood of my car. Inside was a record from the county assessor's office. Gary had filed for a homestead exemption on the Cedar Hollow Road property 11 years ago, a tax break that is only available to the legal owner of a property. On that form, Gary had checked the box saying he was the legal owner of record. That was a third offense. A completely separate false statement made to a government office. I called Hartwell that same night. He was quiet for a moment. "Tell Mr. Webb's aunt I would very much like her phone number." The worst night was not the night of the hurricane. It was a Tuesday, 3 weeks after everything started. Every light off in the apartment. Phone face up on the nightstand, blinking that slow orange notification light like a heartbeat that wouldn't quit. I had already read the comments. All of them. And something in me had started to crack. Not because of what strangers said online. I could handle strangers. What cracked me open was simpler and a whole lot older than any of that. It was one image I kept going back to, my mother standing at the stove, handing Gary strips of plastic sheeting to cover the windows while I stood outside in the yard in the pouring rain. Calm, practiced rhythm of it. Like she had done it 100 times. Like I was already gone before I ever walked out that door. I picked up my phone. I almost called her. Then I opened the nightstand drawer. My dad's pocket watch was inside, wrapped in the handkerchief my grandmother had stitched with my initials the year I was born. I unwrapped it and held it in my palm. Heavier than I remembered, the way things from childhood always feel when you pick them back up as an adult. Crystal still cracked. The second hand still ticking louder than it had any business doing. My grandmother had told me once that he bought it at an estate sale the week he closed on the Cedar Hollow Roadhouse. He said he wanted something that lasted. Something mechanical. Something that kept going without having to be told to. I held it in the dark. Tick. 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 He had been gone 16 years and that watch was still running. It did not need Gary's say-so to keep time. Did not need my mother's approval. Did not need 63 strangers on the internet to decide whether it was worth something. Just kept going. I put the phone back on the nightstand. I lay there in the dark holding the watch until my hand got warm and the ticking started to feel like my own heartbeat, and I fell asleep without deciding to. In the morning, I got up. I went to work. I did my job. It was enough. My mother came to the apartment on a Thursday morning without calling first. I didn't know how she'd found the address. I found out later that Gary had called the hospital, told the front office he was my emergency contact and needed to reach me urgently, and someone had given him enough information. Sandra had driven around until she spotted my car in the lot. She knocked soft. When I opened the door, she looked the way she always looked when she had been crying before arriving somewhere, dried-out eyes, pulled-together face. She had been doing that my whole life. Crying before she got where she was going, then showing up looking composed. "Can I come in?" I let her in. She sat on the edge of the sofa and didn't take off her coat. I leaned against the kitchen counter with my arms at my sides. "Jamie, if Gary goes, I have nothing." Her voice was thin and tight. "I haven't worked in 15 years. I have no savings. I have no plan. I have nowhere to go. I have nothing." "You have me," I said. "You have always had me. You just chose not to take it every single time you chose Gary instead. He is my husband. And Dad was your husband first. Gary took his money. He took his house. He took his daughter's bedroom and turned it into storage. And you let him do all of it." She looked at the floor. Her knuckles were white around the strap of her purse. "You are exactly like your father," she said quietly. "Stubborn. You never bend." "Dad built that house," I said. "Gary just painted over the fence." She stood up, picked up her purse, walked to the door. She did not look back. She did not ask if I was okay. I listened to her footsteps all the way down the hallway until they disappeared into the stairwell. Then there was nothing. I closed the door, locked it, sat down on the floor with my back against the wall and cried for the first time since the night of the storm. I cried until I was empty. Then I got up and washed my face and made dinner. Some choices have to be witnessed even when nobody else is watching. Gary drove to the hotel on a Friday afternoon. He had gotten the address from someone in the neighborhood. I never found out who. He parked in the loading zone, walked through the lobby without stopping at the front desk, and pounded on the door of room 812. My grandmother opened it. She was in a gray cardigan and reading glasses. She looked at Gary the way a person looks at a contractor who has shown up without his bid sheet, calm, slightly bored, not the least bit rattled. "You have no right," Gary said. His voice was louder than I had ever heard it in 16 years. Gary was a man who believed keeping your voice low meant you were in control. But the control was gone now. He had read Hartwell's eviction notice and my letter on the same day, and the whole structure had come down at once. I lived in that house for 16 years. I fixed the roof. I replaced the AC. I painted every wall. I paid property taxes on it year after year. That house is mine. My grandmother stepped aside so he could see the desk behind her, the folders, the documents, the yellow envelope she had been carrying in her coat pocket the night of the storm. She reached in and took it out. Opened it. Inside was the original title deed to the house, Thomas Andrew Callahan. Callahan Family Trust. Purchase date 1996. She held it out so he could read it. "You paid property taxes," she said, her voice steady as a load-bearing wall, "with money taken from my son's life insurance policy. You filed a false statement with a bank to borrow against a property you have never owned. You applied for a tax break reserved for legal owners on a house that was never yours. And you locked my granddaughter outside during a Category 4 hurricane because she had the nerve to ask where the money went." Color left Gary's face the way water leaves a sponge when you wring it out, slowly and then all at once. "You have 14 days, my grandmother said. I will not send the loan documents to the district attorney. But only if you leave." Gary turned around. He walked out without closing the door. He didn't drive home. He drove straight to the county courthouse and filed an emergency motion to block the eviction. It was his last move. Courtroom B, Judge Patricia Harmon presiding. Small courtroom. Wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and a wall clock that ticked like it knew time was being used up and wasn't coming back. Gary sat at the respondent's table with Fitch. He was wearing the button-down shirt I recognized, the one he wore on the 2 Sundays a year he went to church. My mother sat in the row directly behind him, hands folded in her lap, staring at a spot on the floor somewhere between her shoes and the edge of everything. I sat at the petitioner's table with Hartwell. I wore a second-hand blazer I had bought the week before. My dad's pocket watch was on a short chain at my wrist, worn like a bracelet. Cracked crystal picked up the light from the high windows. My grandmother sat in the second row behind me. Dark coat. No jewelry. She did not need any. Hartwell walked the judge through every piece of evidence without hurrying. Trust documentation. The life estate agreement and its conditions. The insurance withdrawal records. The loan application with the false sworn statement and the mismatched signature. Dorothy Reeves's notarized sworn statement describing exactly what she witnessed the night of the hurricane. And Marcus's aunt's discovery from the county assessor's office, the homestead exemption Gary had filed, claiming to be the legal owner 11 years ago. Fitch argued adverse possession. Judge Harmon listened for 5 minutes. Then she raised one hand. Mr. Fitch, adverse possession cannot be applied to trust property in this state. It is settled law. Your client has no ownership claim here. Trust documentation is clear. The life estate violation is fully documented. The loan application raises questions that belong in a different kind of proceeding, and I am referring it to the district attorney's office for independent review. As for the county assessor records, she looked directly at Gary. That matter will also be addressed separately. She closed the file. The emergency motion is denied. The eviction notice stands. Gary sat completely still. My mother did not look up. Fitch gathered his papers slowly, like a man who had known how this was going to end before he walked in. I turned around. My grandmother's eyes were already on the pocket watch at my wrist. And for the first time in all the weeks since she had stepped back into my life, her face was bright with something she made no effort to hide. For 16 years, Gary had been the one deciding what happened in that house. Judge Harmon had just handed those keys to somebody else. I want to pause right here for a second because if you have ever sat across from someone who told you the truth that everybody else in your life was too scared or too comfortable to say, you know what that moment feels like. Rearranges everything. Drop a comment right now. Tell me your city and what time it is there. And if this story is hitting close to something you have been living through, share it, because the person who needs to hear this might be one share away from you. Okay. Almost there. They moved out on a Saturday morning, 14 days after the hearing. A rented moving truck backed into the driveway at 8 o'clock sharp. Gary and Sandra carried boxes out to the tailgate in a quiet, steady rhythm, like they had been rehearsing for this since the gavel came down and just hadn't said it out loud. Maybe they had been packing since the judge said denied, and the sound of it had told them everything they needed to know. I stood on the sidewalk across the street. I did not go to the yard. That yard was legally mine now, completely, finally, without any argument. But standing in it while they loaded up felt like turning justice into a show, and my dad was not that kind of man. I was trying to be his daughter. So I stood on the sidewalk, hands in my jacket pockets. Some neighbors came out. Not all of them, but enough. Mr. Briggs next door stood on his porch with his coffee. Mrs. Kowalski, the woman who had stopped me in the grocery store aisle and told me Gary fixed her lawnmower twice and I should really reconsider, crossed the street and came to stand right beside me. She didn't say anything for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," she finally said. I didn't have the full picture. I nodded. I didn't say it's fine because it wasn't. But I nodded because she was there and that was something. My mother came out the front door last, carrying a small box. Kind you keep letters in or old photographs. She walked down the porch steps and stopped when she was even with me on the sidewalk. Gary was already in the truck cab, engine running, eyes straight ahead through the windshield. Sandra looked at me. Her eyes were dry. Her face was the face of a woman who had spent years making choices that kept her safe and, in doing so, had traded away nearly everything else that mattered. "Your father would be so proud of you," she said quietly. Like she had been holding those words in for a very long time and had finally decided to let them go. Then she walked to the truck, got in, closed the door. Truck backed out of the driveway, turned off Cedar Hollow Road, and they were gone. My grandmother came and stood beside me. She put her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. "I bought the paint on a Sunday. "'Kay, I need you to do something for me right now before this video ends. If this story moved you at all, if any part of it felt familiar, if you have ever had to fight for something that was always rightfully yours, or if you are still in the middle of that fight right now, drop a comment below. Tell me your city and what time it is where you are watching this." I genuinely read every single comment, and every time I see a new city pop up in there, it reminds me that people all over are sitting with these same kinds of stories, and none of us are going through it alone. If you are watching this and you are thinking about someone in your life who needs to hear it, a friend who has been told to keep the peace one too many times, a family member who is sitting on something heavy and doesn't know how to move, share this video with them right now. Not later. Right now. Might be the push they needed. Hit the like button if this story stayed with you. Takes literally 2 seconds and it helps more people find stories like this one. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We do this every week. Real stories. Real families. Real moments that change everything. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss one. There are more stories like Jamie's right here on this channel. The link to the next one is sitting in the description. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way through. I mean every word of that, and I will see you in the next one.